You are watching Pausing with Erik. We pause for a second or two. How do we keep life coherent when so much is changing? This is episode 275, Face Coverings. In these days, we are seeing some different ways in which people in the public space cover up their faces. We are seeing more of it now than we did 10 or 20 years ago. So it is somewhat of a contemporary phenomenon. We're seeing this now. And in today's episode, we pause and make an attempt to try to put this face covering trend in some sort of some perspectives on it. And our goal is to sort of gain some footing so that we may make up our own minds how we feel about face covering. It would seem that face covering can be some different things, and that we may feel differently about it depending on context. So first, I think it might be a good idea to, as a reference point, go back, way back in time in history. To go back to times before history was written or recorded. So let's go back to tribal times, to caveman times, when we lived in tribes here in our Western world. So back then, people covered their faces in this sort of ritualistic setting, as I've understood it. So one way to do it was to late at night or during the night in the caves often, or around a fire, to put on these sort of animal looking masks. And with these sort of covered faces, with these animal looking masks, sort of build up this group energy, this sort of momentum as a group. So it had this sort of this function of social cohesion. And oftentimes, I believe, anthropologists have made the case that this had one function, was that once you achieved this social sort of group energy, with the help of this face covering, you could then go out and function very effectively as a group. perhaps in for hunting or going into battle with another tribe. So we will use this sort of initial prehistoric example to just gain a reference point to what we are seeing now. And then we can sort of, as individuals, make up our own mind how we feel about sort of what face covering has meant to us way back in time and what it means to us now. And we can sort of position ourselves in a personal way along this sort of line. I think this is a good way to go about it. Okay. Old tribal times. Then what kind of examples can we see now in our modern days? We see people covering up their faces in the public spaces for a number of different reasons. We see people covering up their faces because the weather is cold. Some sort of, balaclava or, some sort of cloth to just sort of be protected from the cold wind and rain and snow. That's one use we see. A second example is that we see it in fashion because it looks good, it looks cool. It sort of rhymes with the rest of the fashion outfit, or what you call it. So fashion is another, trends is another example. A third example would be that we see people covering up their faces for political reasons. To sort of mark that we who stand here as a group in this public space, we are together because we have the same sort of face covering. It creates this sort of identity, feeling of identity between the individuals involved. That's the third example. A fourth example is for religious reasons. Some of the world religions and also some of the minor religions have as a practice to cover up their faces in different ways. And there the reasons can be manifold, can be many different reasons for why the faces are covered up for religious reasons. That's the fourth example. And also for a fifth reason we're seeing is for sort of personal protection and anonymity. In our age, when there is so much social media and people can be sort of put online with their name and face, and you can expose people in a new way with social media and their faces. And also we're seeing more and more biometrics technology, that you can identify a person with a smart camera, with a digital camera, sort of using AI, and you can see this is this person and this person was at this place and this time. So then some people cover up their faces in order not to be identified by AI. So personal security. And a sixth example of face covering is for health reasons, to protect mouth and nose from any pathogens or the like. So for health reasons. So already we see that the picture is quite complicated. There are many different reasons why people choose to cover up their faces in these days. And what we want to do in today's episode is to contrast these different ways we see in our modern day with this prehistoric tribal way of covering up our faces. And see that it can be a quite complex, full picture of what face covering really is for, functionally for us. And to make matters even more complicated, we see that in our modern society, when we have rule of law, we separate between civilians and law enforcement, enforcers of the law. And in some instances we see civilians using face coverings, and in other instances we see law enforcement using face coverings. So we have all these different kinds of combinations. Face-covered civilians but not face-covered law enforcement. Or the opposite, face-covered law enforcement but not civilians. And then neither of them face-covered or both face-covered. And all of these different combinations make up different contexts. And it would appear that we feel differently about the face coverings in itself, depending on what we're looking at. So face coverings is a very wide topic and very valuable to pause with for a second or two. That was a long introduction. Here comes the wooden cube of today's episode. Traction. Traction is a worn out skill. It's a skill for whenever we feel worn out, when we feel too tired, cut off or lonely. And if we have a sense of traction, social traction, it can remedy some of that worn out feeling for us. The symbol for our worn out skill traction is a key. A nice looking key. And we want to view traction as sort of the key that opens up the door, that opens up the gate of whatever difficulty we're standing in front of, to unlock the potential behind the obstacle. That's a good symbol. We pause and try this and that to make what is interesting. traction is how we free up forgotten enthusiasm. So, oftentimes, when we come across face coverings in public spaces, traction, this practice, traction can feel difficult to achieve. Like right now, as you are watching this episode with me talking about face coverings, my face is not covered up right now. So you can sort of see a lot of information, a lot of social cues in my expressions in my face. You can see my eyes, my mouth, the little muscles, all these expressions, cues of communication. So traction is easy to achieve when we see each other's faces, because we can see sort of the little cues and the little emotions in the face, and we can react to one another accordingly. We can make something interesting with it, because we can sort of interact with one another by means of expressions. But when our faces are covered, traction is made a whole lot more difficult to achieve. A covered face is more sort of hard to reach. It's more difficult to communicate with. So one point here is to acknowledge that now, in these times when we are seeing more face coverings, it is making us worn out skill. It's making us worn out, because sometimes we come across some people who have covered up their faces in a way we do not like, and that makes us worn out. And in another instance, it might be us who are face covered, and we make the other people worn out by covering up our faces. So these are sort of intertwined, traction and these face masks. Forgotten enthusiasm can almost feel like because if we think about it, our first example, the reference point, the tribe built up enormous enthusiasm once they were masked up. When they had these animal masks on, they could build up immense energy as a tribe, as a group, and then go out and achieve great things as a group. So in one way, the face coverings sort of build up enthusiasm as a group. But in another way, as individuals, when we meet with a group that are covering up their faces, we feel worn out, we feel the opposite of enthusiasm. Do you see? So it's this sort of ambivalent feeling we have towards face coverings. In one context, when we are in the face-covered group, we feel immense enthusiasm. But as individuals meeting, you and I, we have a better chance for traction and enthusiasm if we do not cover up our faces. Very contextual and complex. So I guess it kind of boils down to, do we want traction as a group or as individuals meeting with one another? And it would seem that this dynamic between groups and individuals, face coverings are in the middle of that. Yes, that might be some sort of interesting point to make, that when groups and individuals meet, face coverings between them become like this sort of affirming symbol for it in a way. Face coverings are not one thing. They are many things. That's it for today. Thank you.